Hello and welcome to today's office hours presentation. This is Paul Hoyt welcoming you to today's conversation. Hang on just a second. There we go. I had to get my screen right before I was able to see what was going on with the conversation itself. So welcome to today's office hours presentation. Our office hours presentation is a relaxed, informal mentoring program that we do every Monday at noon Pacific time. This recording is going to be online, and then all the recordings are archived in our members area. In the members area, you'll be able to get the slides, and I think we're going to add audio tracks and transcripts as well. And some of the office hours recordings are going to be in the public area. We're going to let them out there for the public and as YouTube videos, but they won't have. The people who can see the public videos still will not be able to attend the sessions live and ask the questions, nor will they be able to download the slides, the audio tracks, and any of the exercises that we have. The reasons I do these office hours presentation is because I know that being a successful business owner can be a fantastic experience, but I know that it's tough. I know that you need the education, the training, the tools, and the team in order to be successful. And I do want you to get to know me, because once you get to know me, you'll know that I really do care about you and I want you to succeed. Whether you're building a business that's going to be, billions of dollars in revenue and you want it going to be the next Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, or whether you're just wanting to start a little printing shop or a tailor shop or some other small business out there. I find that CEOs and entrepreneurs are generally just fantastic people, and I want to support all of them. No matter whether you want a business that's going to make you $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year, or you aspire to start a business that's going to make you a billionaire. The agenda for our calls is always an in-depth discussion of a business success principle. Then I offer some closing remarks, special offers, and an invitation for next week's session. And then we go into open questions and answers. First, questions and answers and comments with regards to the subject of the day. And then later on, we'll just open it up to whatever comes to your mind. I want you to join us online at Facebook with our Facebook Brilliant Business Group. The URL is there on your screen with facebook.com/groups/Brilliant Business, where you can make comments, ask some questions, share your insights and the takeaways, and other people will support you in the way that I support you too. So I encourage you to join that Facebook group and support each other with masterminding and brainstorming kinds of activities. I also invite you to like my business page, which is on Facebook. And when you do that, you'll see my daily energy of the day posts that I have there and other comments and other things that we have too. Today's topic is on getting it done, excellence in project management, based on a book that I wrote in 1995 on practical project management. In 1995, I was working for a company called Electronic Data Systems, also called EDS. I'm sure that the people on the call will remember Ross Perot and EDS, which he started in 1960 or so. I had the privilege of working for EDS from 1995 through 1997. And the job that I had was mentoring project managers. So we put a large number of extremely qualified database architects, system architects, project managers, and programmers on EDS projects all around the world. And one of my jobs was mentoring the project managers that we put out on assignment. So when I was with EDS, I wrote a book called Practical Project Management, which was, of course, focused on information systems projects. But many of the concepts and principles apply to projects regardless of whether you're working with computers or you're working with building materials or whatever it is that you're working with. As always, I try to relate the subject matter of the day to one or more of the key performance areas, and project management is square in the area of leadership. So as a leader, it's your responsibility to get things done. And one of the two basic ways that we have of getting things done is project management. It's also strongly related to the key performance area of operations and administration, because it's part of the operations at every business in order to be good at operations management and project management. Our agenda for today is we're going to talk about an overview of project management, talk about project teams, talk about creating the project plan, challenges in project management, your project complexity factors, getting it right, which is doing things right when it comes to being a project manager, and offering some tips, and then finally concluding with the bottom line. But first, let's talk about the relationship in between management and leadership, because sometimes those terms get confused a little bit, and this is the way that I use them, and a way I think that most people use them as well. Leadership is doing the right things. It's about making great choices, setting strategy, determining directions. It's all about doing the right things, and management then is doing things right. And the biggest two areas in management are operations management and project management. I want you to understand the difference between those, because today we're going to talk about project management, and then next week I'm going to give another presentation, and that time it'll be on operations management. So here's a little bit of a preview of that, and to help you understand project management a little better too. So operations management is typically the discipline of management that's focused on repetitive tasks, things that you do over and over and over again, such as processing accounts payable, such as doing payroll, such as anything that has to do with an assembly line or any sort of repetitive manufacturing tasks. Typically those tasks are permanent, and the team that you have in place to do the operational tasks are also permanent teams. You don't swap out people all of the time. You have the opportunity to optimize your operations management with a variety of different methodologies out there, which we'll talk about a little bit more next week. Continuous process improvement, or CPI, statistical process control, or SPC, total quality management, or TQM, or Six Sigma, which is another discipline by which we optimize our repetitive tasks, by which we optimize our operations management. In contrast to operations management, project management is a discipline in which that is typically only done one time. It has a very specific and an end to it. There's no repeating it time after time after time. The teams are typically temporary teams that come together. Some of them may work for you as employees at your company. Some of them may be in other departments, or some of them may be contractors, because project teams are typically interdepartmental or cross-functional teams. So people who do not work with each other, day after day, are typically come together for project teams. And generally speaking, the project that you are doing hasn't been done before, or is being done very rarely. And the focus, instead of optimizing the process, the focus for project management is on quality, timeliness, and managing according to budget. But unfortunately, with projects, it's difficult to estimate the time and the budgets of projects, primarily because it is a one-time thing, and generally something that's not been done before, at least not exactly in the way that you're doing it before, which makes it challenging to estimate the time and the budget that a project is really going to take. Here's some examples of projects. First of all, from my history, software development projects. We want to create a new accounts payable system. We want to create a new customer relationship management system. We want to implement a new software system. All of the software development projects are classic examples of projects that we want to entail, that take a cross-functional project team, that are typically only done one time, and that typically are fraught with time and budget issues. Putting up a new website is another example of a project. In this particular case, there may not be any exact coding, especially if you're using some of the website development platforms out there like WordPress or Joomla or Homestead. So you may not actually be coding anything, but you are implementing a software system. Other types of projects might be launching a new product. We're bringing a new product to market, and in phase one of the product, we're going to be developing the prototype. Then we're going to take it out to the marketplace and see what they say in phase two. In phase three, we're going to adjust the prototype and create the ability to produce these at low volume. Stage four might be high volume, etc. So whenever we launch a new product, that's always a project that is created and then executed in order to bring that new product to the marketplace. Publishing a book can be a short project or it can be a very long project. When I published my last book in October of last year, so it's been almost a year since I brought a book to the market, although I have a new one that's coming out pretty quick. When we publish a new book to the market, it can be a fairly long project. The project that I had to launch my last book was also kind of a product launch project, and it took about 6 months. So in the first 6 months of this project, we completed the manuscript, we edited the manuscript, we did the exterior book design, the cover design, and the interior book design. We created the Amazon page, we solicited reviews and endorsements, we updated the manuscript, we created the landing pages, we lined up our affiliate partners, we did all kinds of stuff. It was a very complex project plan in order to publish the book and launch the book, because we had a very specific goal and outcome, and that was for me to become a best-selling author. And the project plan worked well, and I am honestly able to say that I am a best-selling author, but it was because of the project plan that I outsourced to a third party that we created and executed between the 2 or 3 of us who are on the project team. Other examples of project plans might be custom homes and office buildings, where you go to an architect and design it, and then you go through the different phases of building the home or office building, where we're digging the foundation, we're pouring the foundation, we're completing the foundation, we're framing it and building up the walls, and then we're doing the interior work that needs to be done, the interior fine carpentry work, etc. Every time that you build a custom home or an office building, any sort of commercial project, that is a project plan in itself. And another example of a simple project plan might be moving, either physically or virtually. If you're going to move across country, which I have done a few times in my life, believe me, it is a project plan. It is figuring out where you're going to go and who's going to help you move and what you're going to rent and what are you going to do when you get there, etc. It can be a multi-step project plan to do that. Sometimes, by the way, taking vacations can entail a project plan as well, especially if it's an extended vacation and especially if it's international in scope. Some people just like to, run to the airport and figure out where the next plane is going and jump on it and go, which might be an interesting vacation to take, but I have a tendency to want to plan things out. One of the most important aspects of being able to execute a project plan correctly is to have a great project team. And there are many different roles on the project team. One of the most important roles is the project owner or the funder, the person who is actually going to own the outcome of the project. When the project is done, the person who is going to own the house that's being built or own the book that's being published is by the project owner or the funder. That person might also be the project plan champion, but oftentimes in corporations, the project champion, the person who is most, enthusiastic about the project, and the person who really wants to see the project be done, might not be the one who actually owns the output or owns the results of the project. So you might have project champions, maybe plural, maybe multiple project champions, who are not on the project team in any other way other than to encourage people to actually do it and get it done. The role that we're going to talk about primarily today is the project manager role, and that is the person who's responsible for creating the project plan, for building the project team, and for implementing the project plan and getting the results done so that they can then hand those results or that completed product or project over to the project owner or the funder. Another role on a project team is the project coordinator or administrator. That's the person who does the detailed tracking work, who takes the minutes of the meetings, who makes sure that the phone calls are being made to members of the project team so that everybody understands exactly what their roles and responsibilities are. And they're kind of the clerk of the project, the person who coordinates it and keeps track of all the documentation. There can be in some projects a project librarian as well, whose primary goal is to make sure that all of the notes and all of the minutes of the meetings and all of the correspondence is properly filed away in a library somewhere. I didn't mention those as part of the project team, but they could be. Typically, projects will have a technical or design lead with an architectural product. The design lead is an architect with a software development project. That is sometimes the CTO, Chief Technology Officer at a company, or at least the design lead or the product manager who is responsible for the software project. So you can have a product manager or a technical architect be on the project team, and their responsibility is for designing the project and making sure that the end project meets the goals and objectives of the project. And then you've got other members of the team. Like I mentioned, the project librarian. In software development, it can be programmers. If you're moving from one place to the next, it can be the movers or the people who are going to clean the old house or the people who are going to install equipment at the new house, etc. If you're building a residential real estate project, then there's all kinds of different project team members. You can have the drywaller and the foundation people and the electricians and the plumbers and the framers and the finished carpenters and the roofers, and the landscapers. It goes on as to who will be on your project team if that's the type of project that you're executing. Regardless of who's on your project team, one of the most important things that you can do as a project manager is create a good project plan. That project plan typically in the very first step is to define the outcomes, to define what it is that you want to create. So if you're building a house, it's working with your architect to define the finished drawings plus all of the detailed drawings so that we understand specifically what it is that we're going to build. If we're building a software project, then it's specifically what outcomes that we want to see, what behaviors that we want to track, etc. Once we define what the outcomes are, we figure out what tasks are necessary in order for us to get the results that we want. And typically we would break it into phases of a project as well, where each phase of the project would have very specific tasks that are necessary to be performed. So we typically ask ourselves questions like, what do we need to do in order to have the outcomes that we want? And what do we need to have on hand in order to do it? And then once we've defined a task, we ask ourselves the question again, what do we need to have in place in order to complete this task? What resources do we need to have in place in order to complete this task? And each time we ask that question, we get a little more detail in our project plan, and we get a little more refinement to the project plan, and we continue asking those questions. What do we need to accomplish before we accomplish this? What do we need to have on hand in order to accomplish that? And we keep asking those questions until we get the detail of the project plan defined. Then once we have the tasks created, we determine the sequence and the dependencies of the task. And I'll show you a little diagram here in a second that outlines the dependencies of a task, which are, generally speaking, what do we need to do before we do this particular task? Is there anything that we need to have accomplished and done? And before that, what do we have to have accomplished and done? And before that, what do we have accomplished and done? Until we really understand the sequence and the dependencies between the different tasks that need to be accomplished on the project plan. Then we determine the resources required by asking those questions. What do we need to have on hand in order to actually do the job that we want to do? And then we estimate the time that it takes to gather the resources and the time that it takes to complete the tasks. So in some projects, you can gather the resources very quickly. In other projects, it may take you 9 months or 2 years or longer in order to gather the resources. It was my pleasure recently to watch the new San Francisco 49ers football stadium being built, which is only like a mile away from my house here in Santa Clara, California. And you know that all of the iron that went into that and all the supplies that went into that, it was a 2-year-long project, but I think that they started acquiring some of the material even before then. It just takes a long time to get iron ordered from a factory and then delivered to the work site. It can take a long time to get the marble floors or the vanities or any of the special treatments that you might have for a residential real estate project that you might have. It may take a while in order to get the funding that's necessary to do a project. So resources sometimes are physical materials, and sometimes those resources are money. Sometimes those resources are the people who free up. So if you're going to, for example, do a movie, that is a classic example of a project as well, which has different phases to the project: the pre-production phase, the actual production phase, the post-production phase, the launch phase of a movie project. And sometimes if you want Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie or Harrison Ford on your team, you may have to wait until they're available to gather those resources to actually do that project. So then we gather the resources required, and then we launch the project. That's what we do whenever we create a project plan and begin to step into the implementation of the project. Here's an example of a project plan document. This is called a Gantt chart. I should have put that on the slide, but Gantt is spelled G-A-N-T-T. Gantt with an extra T at the end of it. It's named after a guy named Mr. Gantt, who is the person who actually designed this Gantt chart. As you can see on this Gantt chart, we have the different tasks that need to be performed on the left-hand side in what they call a work breakdown structure, which is what the WBS stands for, a work breakdown structure. It really means the outline for the individual tasks. And then on the right in the Gantt chart itself, we'll see these listed with some sort of a timeline. So as you can see here, the first task, 1.1, needs to be completed before 1.2 is done, before 1.3 is done, before 1.4 is done, and these particular tasks just cascade one to another. So even though task number 1.5 is only a few days long, we can't start that task until we completed 1.4, which couldn't start before we completed 1.3, etc. Down here, though, you'll see some of these tasks being implemented in parallel. 2.1, 2.1 can be done in parallel with task 1.5, and tasks 2.2 and 2.3 can also be done in parallel just a little bit after by the time that we started task 1.5 and a little bit after we started task 2.1. So when you get training in project management, you can read these Gantt charts very well, and they describe the dependencies between the tasks, the sequence between the tasks, which tasks can be done in parallel and which tasks has to wait for other tasks to be completed first, and even can show you what we call a critical path. I'm not going to talk about critical path today, but with every project there is a series of tasks that need to be completed in sequence, and some tasks that can be completed in parallel with those tasks, and there is a critical path associated with every project out there. And those are the tasks that are on the critical path have to be completed on time and on budget, because if they slip time and budget, then the entire project slips in its time and its budget. Some things you don't have to worry about because you just kind of are doing those in the background, but other things are mission critical and they absolutely have to be done according to schedule, or the entire project slips the schedule. So one of the critical aspects of being good at project management is being able to create an effective project plan, and oftentimes communicating that to other members of the project team via this example that's shown here of an example of a Gantt chart. Every time that you do a project, though, be sure you know that there are going to be challenges in project management. A project is never problem-free. I've never worked on a project that didn't have some issues along the way. And here are some of the examples of the issues that I have seen on projects that were especially challenging. One of the things that really hurts you is if you have poorly defined goals and objectives, poorly defined outcomes of the project. If you don't know exactly what it is that you're going to create, I can tell you the odds are that some people on the project team, some of the project champions, some of the project owners, and other people might be disappointed in the outcomes. The more clearly that you can define the outcomes of the project, the more likely it is that you will have a successful project completion. Other things that can get in your way are things like scope creep. That is a specific technical term, and that means that as we were executing the project, the scope of the project changed. In commercial building projects and real estate projects, they have change orders that are necessary because almost every project actually does have some amount of scope creep, where as you get into the project, you find out that the original plan isn't going to work very well and that you need to change that plan, and oftentimes that will require a delay or require some extra funding. So we issue a change order to the original project plan, the one that was signed off on and the one that was bought, so that we have the authorization necessary to spend additional monies or to take a little extra time with it. Scope creep is a big challenge for many projects, especially when there's creativity involved with it. Sometimes we have poor estimates for our tasks. We thought a task was going to take 2 weeks and it actually takes 4. We thought a task was going to take 3 days and it actually took 2. As it turns out, that most of the poor estimates, and by most I mean like 95% of all of the poor estimates, will be that the estimate was too little. That it's very rare on a project team that estimates are overestimates. So we have to make sure, by the way, that we have lots of contingency time factored into our project timeline in order to make up for those times in which individual tasks were estimated as to be too little. Other things may be just missing tasks entirely. So we thought that we had to do A, B, and C, but we really had to do A, B, C, and D. And then by definition, whatever time it takes to do project D, how much ever it costs to do task D, is going to add to the time required for the project plan and add to the money required for the project plan. Other challenges might be miscommunication, where somebody thought they were supposed to do something, or you thought that they had committed to doing a task, and they only to be surprised to find out that they didn't get the message, they didn't get the memo, and they had not been focusing their time and effort on it at all. So as we talked earlier, it's the primary responsibility of the project manager and the project coordinator and the project administrator to make sure that miscommunications are minimized, that there's not very many of them. There's bound to be a few, especially the more people that you have on a project team, the more likely it is that there's going to be some miscommunication amongst the team members. But miscommunication can be a real challenge in project management. Another big challenge can be unstable resources, where people just don't show up, or the materials not being delivered in the time frame that you expected because the supplier that's not delivering according to their commitments and their timelines cause you to have unstable resources. And unstable resources means, by definition, that things are not happening in the way that you expected them to, the way that you predicted them to, so that can cause a big challenge in your project as well. Natural disasters can happen. I had a natural disaster just last week that caused me not to execute on one of my project plans. That natural disaster was my website went down from Thursday to Friday. And it took a lot of extra effort and working till midnight and 1 a.m. on both days in order to get the website back up and running. And that's an example of a natural disaster, something that was totally unexpected and out of control that impacted the project. Other types of natural disasters are things like hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and earthquakes, acts of war, acts of God, all kinds of different things that can get in the way. There's no way to predict for those. We like to have some contingency time in our schedule, but you can't really predict or account for the time that it happens with a natural disaster. And one of the most interesting challenges that project managers face, especially in corporations, if you're listening to this and you're working at a company and you're wanting to understand project management a little bit better, watch out for this next one, which is treachery and deceit. As it happens, the larger the project, the more likely it is that somebody in your company is going to be upset that you're actually doing the project in the first place. They may be very resistant to any sort of a change, which happened to me a lot when I was installing new computer systems at companies. You would find some people saying, yep, I want to go for it. I'm eager to learn the new system. I'm eager to learn the new job. And you would also find some people that would say, man, I don't want to do that. I didn't vote for this project. I don't want to see the project, and I don't want to see the project be successful. And so you have to watch out for treachery and deceit, people who will sabotage the project, badmouth the project, try to get other people to quit working on the project, put other things on people's plates so that they can't dedicate the time that they had committed to the project, etc. And I'm primarily talking to CEOs and entrepreneurs out there, but when you grow a business of any size, understand that the more people that you have on a project team and the less camaraderie and teamwork that you have amongst the people who are on the team, the more likely it is that you might see some treachery and deceit. I hope that you don't see it. I've certainly seen it. Haven't seen it in a while, but I've certainly seen it in my 30 years of corporate experience. Each project may also have, in addition to these challenges, other what I call project complexity factors, or things that make some projects far more difficult than other projects. Some examples might be the experience of a team. I see this as being one of the biggest mistakes that CEOs and entrepreneurs make when they're starting their business, is that they add additional complexity to the project of starting a business by having inexperienced teammates. They, for whatever reason, and I think I know the reason, but for usually they decline to get an appropriate amount of experience on the team, which really adds to the complexity because people have to learn a lot more if they don't have experience in the way that you really need for them to have experience. Other sorts of things that can add to the complexity are team dynamics. If people don't get along with each other, they don't, perhaps in some cases they don't like each other. It's very typical for some project teams to be cross-functional or interdepartmental at a large company, or have different resources and suppliers, different contractors working together who've never worked together before. You may find that they work seamlessly together, and it's like they've worked together on a whole bunch of projects. And by the way, the more professional they are, the more that's likely to be the outcome. But if they're inexperienced, and if you're inexperienced, you may have challenges with your team dynamics, which can take away a lot of the energy from the project team. Stability of the components we talked about a little bit before. One of the challenges that I see in information system projects and with CEOs and entrepreneurs is that they want to use unproven, unstable components in whatever they're building. They want to use the latest whiz-bang software feature or a plug-in in terms of WordPress or some sort of programming language that nobody else really knows much about, because they really just enjoy working with things that are on the bleeding edge of technology. Or they may choose to work with 3 or 4 unproven things on their project team. Generally speaking, the more unstable components you have factored into your product or project, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to meet your time and budget constraints. I'll repeat that. The more unstable your components are, the less experience you have on your project team, the more unproven all of those resources are, the less likely you are to be able to complete your project on time and budget. That, by the way, is why the federal government oftentimes requires what they call COTS technology, C-O-T-S technology, to be used in their project. And COTS stands for Common Off the Shelf, because they don't want to factor in any sort of unproven components. They want to use as much as possible COTS technology, or common off-the-shelf technology, in their projects, because they realize that having unproven components in their product will decrease the probability of success. The scale of the project also adds to the complexity of it. So it may go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you have just a 1-month project that has a $5,000 budget and just a couple of people on the team, it's got a much more likelihood of being successful than a project that's going to take 2 years and have 200 people on the team and cost $1 billion. The scale of the project does matter, because it really contributes to the complexity of the project, and generally speaking, the more complex a project is, the less likely you're going to be able to complete it on time and on budget. The scale of the project includes things like the sheer number of tasks, the number of people on the team, the length of the project, and the size of the solution. All of those contribute to the scale of a project, and all of those add complexity to the project. And the final complexity factor I want to talk about is the mission-critical nature of the project. My experience is that if a project is really, really important to a company, if it's like a do or die, or we have to get this done or our company folds, or we have to get this up and down or we're losing tens of thousands, or have to get the project back up and completed, or we're losing tens or 20 thousands of dollars every day, the more the critical nature is of the project, the more mission critical it is, also the less likely it is to be completed on time, on budget, When I was used to demonstrate computer systems, we would always say that the importance of the number of people watching the demonstration and the importance of the people watching the demonstration was inversely proportional to the success of the demonstration. What that meant is if a lot of people were watching and it was real important to them, that it was not likely to go very well at all. And that seemed to be a truism back in the early days of software development anyway. So be cautious. If you find yourself on a project team where you don't have a lot of experience on your team, where the team hasn't worked together before, and some of the components and some of the team members themselves are unstable or unproven, and it's a large-scale project and your business depends upon it, it's a very complex project, and it's not likely to go exactly the way that you want it to. You're likely to face a lot of challenges when it comes to executing that project. Here's some things that you can do to make sure that you get it right. Have the right team in place, the right agreements in place, and the right tools, and the right plans themselves with the right methodology, and of course the right communications. So first of all, the right team. Make sure that your roles are properly defined and staffed. Make sure that you have the appropriate experience on your team and they have winning attitudes. And you make sure that you have defined a winnable game worth playing, that everybody is bought into this. Make sure that you have the right agreements with your team members. In some cases, it's going to be a fixed bid contract. In some cases, it might be time and materials contracts with third parties. I'm a big fan of having incentives and rewards built into your contracts, where you have some sort of holdbacks in your relationship with your suppliers to make sure they're with you and committed to seeing the project done on time and on budget. Make sure you've got the right communication, very clear plans, regular meetings with your teammates, making sure that you've got the agenda prepared before the meetings with the right materials prepared before the meetings. Make sure that you take minutes and clearly define your action items that come out of the meetings with your project team. And send reminder notices out to the people who are focused on getting the job done, to remind them how important it is for them to complete it, and to check in with them periodically, just to say, hey Pete, I know that you're working on this project. I just want to remind you that this is on the critical path, that it's mission critical that you get this done this week. Are you going to be able to do that? Is there anything that I can do to support you in making sure that you are meeting your commitment to the rest of the project team in order to get this thing accomplished? And make sure that you've got periodic status updates going out to all of the members of the project team. The project owners, the project managers, the project champions, everybody on the project team should be getting an update on the status periodically. And in some cases, you might have to actually have acceptance form to make sure that people have accepted that they have a particular deliverable on the project so that you can move on and make sure that you got their buy-in for doing that. Have the right tools in place. For some projects, it's just simple documents and spreadsheets. I'm a big fan of a 90-day growth plan and very simple growth management plans. But you may find yourself in a position to use more complex project management tools like Smartsheets or like MS Project or like Clarizen and other online collaborative tools. I really am a big fan of online project management tools where everybody on the virtual project team can see what the status of the project is and even update the status and communicate to other project team members periodically. Also, it's important for you to choose the right methodology. There are a couple of them out there that I defined in the book that I wrote so long ago. One of them is the Waterfall Methodology, and the other one is an Iterative Methodology. The Waterfall Methodology looks like this, and this is a diagram from the book that I called Practical Project Management, where we have different phases of the project, starting out with a definition and planning stage, going into requirements analysis, then the design, then the construction, then the implementation and testing, and then the maintenance phase of the project. It's called waterfall because once you go from step 1 to step 2, you never go back up the waterfall. When you go from step 2 to step 3, you never go back. That's why acceptance forms are oftentimes required to make sure that you've got people's attention and their buy-off, that you've completed step 2 before you move on to step 3. But the more popular methodology these days is an iterative methodology. And in an iterative methodology, we define in a master planning phase the overall project, and then we go into a repetitive process for doing definition and planning of this phase, requirements analysis of this phase, design, construction, and implementation of this phase, and then we do it again for the next phase of a project. Whenever you're building a company, for CEOs and entrepreneurs and for startups, this is the most common methodology that I see when it comes to starting up a new methodology, where we'll have milestones and phases, and then every once in a while we'll pop back up and revisit our master plan to see if we need to make adjustments in the master plan before we move on. Here's some more tips for you for being a successful project manager. Avoid those Star Trek projects, which boldly go where no man has gone before. If you're on a Star Trek project where nobody's ever done this before, we don't even know exactly what it is that we're going to be doing, the odds of it turning out well are not likely, not very good at all. So I'm typically a fan of avoiding what I call a Star Trek project. And generally speaking, as we've talked about before, the larger the project and the greater the complexity, the more contingency time and money that you need in your project team. I'm going to give you a little thing I talk about called the iceberg theory. The iceberg theory says that when we see an iceberg out in the ocean, 1/7 of the mass of the iceberg is visible above the surface of the ocean. But we pretty much know that 6/7 of that is hidden beneath the surface of the water. Well, when you have a very large project, it's not just one iceberg, but it's a field of icebergs. And we can predict the size or the estimate of the iceberg volume below the surface if we can see the tip of the iceberg. But when you have a field of icebergs, you have icebergs hidden behind icebergs. And for those, they typically end up being missing tasks completely. So the larger the project, the more likely it is that you will not only have missed estimates, but you will have missed tasks. And the more likely it is that you will need to have change orders that change the scope of the project as you get into the project itself. Another tip is for you to celebrate success and milestones along the way. It's real important if you have a long project to celebrate the success of a completion of a phase of the project so that people can have some sense of completion about them as they go on with the project team. So here's the bottom line. Project management is a critical competency of any CEO of entrepreneur. You really need to get project management experience on your team. Get somebody with a driver personality, somebody that is committed to making the calls, kicking a little booty if they have to in order to make sure that things are being done in the way that they're planned on being done. And focus on meeting your commitments. So this has been our agenda for today. We talked about an overview of project management. We talked about project teams. We talked about creating the project plan, challenges in project management, project complexity factors, getting it right, and a few tips, and of course ended up with the bottom line. So here's your homework and your exercise. I want you to talk to other project managers. I want you to focus on becoming a great project manager yourself. And if you need to, read books, take courses on project management, and get coaching and support to outsource your project management and to improve your skills. And you can, by the way, outsource project management. You can hire people to assist in project management just in the same way that you hire people to provide individual tasks or components of your overall project plan. We're going to have open questions and answers in just a minute, where we're going to have comments and questions on the topic of the day and then any other issues. I want you to tell me what your biggest takeaways are and what insights that you gained from the presentation, and tell me what you're going to focus on next week. Because as you know, my distinctions are that I don't want a lot of your time, a lot of your money. I just want you to get the support that you need, that you can use and you can afford. I don't want you to jump into the deep end before you learn how to swim, and I don't believe that belief and persistence alone will guarantee your success. I think you have to have excellence in operations management. I think you have to have excellence in project management in order to meet your outcomes. Just believing it's going to happen isn't going to make it happen at all. So as a consequence, our support services are that we offer education, training, consulting, and coaching, and as we announced just a couple of weeks ago, growth management support, which is in essence project management support for the project of growing your business. I want you to sign up for my new Business Growth Acceleration Kit if you haven't already. Just go to paulhoyt.com/CEO bonus, and you get in that kit the 5 Winning Choices of CEOs, an article on the 10 things that you should know about raising capital, some samples of the inspirational works that I've created, a free business clarity session, which is a half-an-hour consulting session to help you gain clarity to where you are in your business and the ways in which we might be able to support you, and some surprise bonuses as well. I think the value of this program can be enormous. If you listen to the 5 choices of winning CEOs, I'm confident that it's going to help you make better choices and help you avoid the mistakes that will slow you down and shut you down. And speaking of that, I really encourage you to purchase my CEO training program, Beyond Business Survival, which is what you need to know when you are the CEO so that you can avoid those mistakes that slow you down or shut you down completely. Our next office hours is going to be next Monday, September the 29th, and the topic is going to be on operations management. Let me know what other topics that you'd like to see me to address by going to paulsurvey.com. And in the meantime, before we meet again, do your homework. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. This was a particularly long office hours presentation. I didn't realize how long it was going to be until about 20 or 30 minutes into it, which you'll notice I picked up the pace a little bit. But we still have time for some questions and answers, and I'm willing certainly to stay on the call an extra 10 minutes or so if you'll hang with me and you have some questions for me or something that you want to discuss. So with that, Stephanie, do we have any questions for today's call?
Yes, got a couple here.
Okay.
One of the things that I've noticed myself, and somebody has a question here in the same vein, is that typically when you plan your projects out, I was told by one of my coaches years ago that you plan it out, you get your time frame, and then you times everything by 2 or 3. Is that something? Yeah. Is that something that you recommend, or how do you factor in? Because again, as you say, there's so many unknown variables in there.
You know, for short projects, the answer is no. You know, if you've done this, you know, a dozen times or done very similar projects a dozen times, then you can have a pretty good idea about how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. If you're doing very large projects that you haven't done before, that other members on your team don't have a lot of experience with, generally speaking, the more contingency time you need. Murphy's Law says it's always going to take twice as long and cost twice as much as you thought that it's going to be. There's also a corollary to Murphy's Law that I can't remember what the name of the corollary is. It says even after you have doubled your time and money budgets, that you're still going to take you twice as long as you thought that it was going to take. That's an interesting corollary, and unfortunately I've seen projects where that was true. So generally speaking, with very short projects, you don't need a lot of contingency time because you're very familiar with it. But with long projects, the longer the project, the more complex the project, the more mission-critical nature of the project, the more important it is to under-promise and over-deliver. And the way that you do that is by factoring a lot of contingency time and a lot of contingency funding into the project plan itself. Great question.
Excellent. Another question. When you're launching, many times I've worked with people who wait until the project is until everything is worked out and everything is perfect. Other people believe that getting it out there first is the best way, despite the bugs and the imperfection. What's your opinion on that?
I think it depends on the nature of the project. So, for example, if I'm going to bring a new pacemaker to market, you know, if that sucker doesn't work, people are going to die. So that is not the type of product that I would bring to market and just bring it in some sort of a prototype phase before it's thoroughly vetted and tested. On the other hand, if I have an example of an information product, I might just throw something up there and invite people to come in and take a look at it and tell me what they think. I might create a prototype and send that prototype out to my marketplace and see whether or not it can be, see whether or not they like it. If it's something that can be done with an iterative methodology, where we can do the prototype and then we can create release 2 and then we can create release 3 and then we can create release 4, with an appropriate amount of time and money at each phase, and we're not like killing people if it doesn't work, then I'm a big fan of the iterative methodology and just getting it out in the marketplace, and as I oftentimes say, learning the lessons that only the marketplace can teach us. But if it's a critical project, a mission critical project, a person critical project like a pacemaker or some other medical device, or if it's a waterfall methodology project where you don't really have the opportunity to go back and revisit some of the early phases if you screwed up, then it's real important to have the plans in place and to think it through very, very thoroughly before you start. Good example of that would be to build a house. You know, if the first part of the house is to dig the foundation and then pour the foundation, that's not something that you can go back and fix very easily at all. So you need to make sure that you have your plans completed before you start putting the backhoe in the ground and digging the holes for the foundation. Hope that helped. Next question, Stephanie.
Great. What kind of skill sets does a good project manager have, a healthy and wise project manager?
You know, in the book Practical Project Management, I talk a little bit more about the skill sets of the project manager, and it really kind of depends on the project team itself or the nature of the project. So some projects are what I call assembly projects, where there's not a lot of creativity involved. We're just putting together the pieces. And in those cases, you may want to have a real driver, kind of a drill sergeant mentality that's really required to make sure that you're not cracking the whip. I don't want to use that example, but you're being very diligent and you have very much a driver personality to get the job done, and you're not taking any excuses. If somebody says, I didn't get it done, you tell them to stay up all night and get the dang job done. You need to work the weekend. You need to be on this 24/7 because you're slowing down my entire project. And that's a type of personality and the type of management skills that are necessary on some types of projects. On other types of projects, where it's a design project and people who are on the project team are more artists and maybe more sensitive, that type of personality is not going to work at all. You have to have a lot of, I'd say, very finely tuned relationship skills and the ability to, help somebody overcome a little bit of challenge they're having from an emotional issue or a personal issue. It takes a completely different mindset for the project manager and a completely different skill set of the project manager, whether you're working on a highly creative design project with lots of sensitive artists on the team, or whether you're working with a construction project where it's just a matter of snapping to it and getting the job done, minute by minute by minute. So, I think that the best answer to that is it really depends. Gosh, I'm sounding like an attorney now. But it really does depend on the nature of the project itself as to what skill sets or what mindset is required. I'll answer the skill set question a little bit differently. A project manager has to be very diligent. They have to be very focused. They have to be very committed. They have to be able to wake up in the morning and know exactly what needs to be done that day and be able to pick up the phone and talk to people who are responsible for completing those tasks or assisting in those tasks and be very committed to making that happen. So a lot of diligence and clerical skills are required on the project team. By the way, it doesn't have to be the project manager. If the project manager is not a gifted clerk and is not very diligent and disciplined, then the project manager can get a project coordinator or a project administrator who does have that skill set and that mindset to be on the team to help the team be successful. Thank you for that question. Next question.
You did talk a little bit about some of the systems in the software. I think it was Clarazon and Smartsheets and in the Microsoft projects. Is there any other kind of systems that you recommend? Example, how to do all those things that you just talked about. What kind of systems would you recommend?
Well, the fourth one that I recommended in there was very simple documents and spreadsheets. It's if the project plan is pretty simple, you may find it a better communication tool to have a very simple communication tool. So some people are overwhelmed when they see a very complex project plan. And it's far better just to send them emails and memos that say, here are the top 3 things that I want you to focus on this week. because you may find that they won't be able to pick their own tasks out of a project plan, that they might get overwhelmed when they see the depth of the project and the complexity of the project. So even more simple communication tools than Smartsheets, Clarizen, or Microsoft Project might be appropriate for some projects and for some team members. And I know that there's a lot of project management tools that are being offered in a software as a service, cloud-based infrastructure model out there. Basecamp is another one that I've used on some projects. It doesn't have Gantt capability. It doesn't show dependencies between tasks, but it's another example of a simple communication tool to be used amongst project team members. It does have the capability of having to-do lists and tasks, but there's no interdependencies necessary or resources that can be tagged to tasks or any of the other sorts of things that more complex project management tools have. So it really does just depend on the project itself. Next question.
We just got a comment here. It just reminds us of the call that we did not too long ago about the communications within the team. Yeah. All the various ways to communicate within the team. That would be a good office hours to review. Good idea.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Just one more question here. Project management on the go. Any tips for mobile project management?
So I'm not sure I understand what mobile project management means. It may mean virtual teams, or it may be, you know, a mobile software package like an application that's going to run on a smartphone. So I really don't know. So I'll see if I can answer it both ways. So if by mobile project management you mean project management amongst virtual teams, then I think the key is to have collaborative tools online where everybody can see them and everybody can communicate with them, and having regular project team meetings, because you're not likely to have the team members stumble into each other in the hallway. You're not going to have the advantage of additional communication between project team members that happens naturally in a corporate environment whenever everybody's on the project team is in, you know, physical close proximity to each other. But because one person of the team's in Seattle and another one's, you know, in Florida and another one's in New York City and another one's in San Diego, you really need to make sure that you have regular status meetings, an online tool to make sure that you're communicating the tasks that are required and the progress on each one of those tasks. So just over-communicate would be a really, really good idea. If by mobile on-the-go project team, that's what you meant, we have a virtual team. If you're meaning that you want to create a mobile application, then I don't know a lot about mobile application development, so I'd fall back on my experts rule that says get 3 experts on your team to make sure that you know what the most recent technology platforms are that are being used to develop mobile applications, and make sure that you understand how much they really cost and how long they really take by talking to people who have successfully created mobile applications before, and by talking to people who have successfully used your potential suppliers before. So when you're out of your depth, it's real important to talk to lots of experts and talk to the references of those experts to make sure you can make great decisions for your team. Any other questions, Stephanie?
No more questions. We do have a comment. Chuck says, having to rely on or deal with any government agency introduces complexity of an order of magnitude. Isn't
Amen to that? Amen to that, Chuck. I've had that opportunity before by working with projects that were responsible for what they call DCAA accounting, which is Defense Contractors Accounting Administration or something like that rules, and other government, because it's so unpredictable. And I would say that's the true of almost any big company. So if you're dealing with a utility that I've had people described as the worst of big business and big government all rolled into one, that can be a big challenge too. So that's a great comment, Chuck. I appreciate that. And with that, we will conclude another Office Hours presentation. Thank you so much for coming live or for listening to this recording. Join us next week on September the 29th when we talk about operations management, And until we meet again, this is Paul Hoyt wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Thanks.